Thank you. Thank you. You guys are awesome. In this particular segment, we want to focus on 2 of the 4 personality types. Now, I take a chance at start counting personalities because it sounds like there are only 4. And as I mentioned in our last segment, everyone is a blend of all 4 of these, which makes many different particular blends that we learn how to understand and work with. But we want to, sometimes if we can see things in the narrow more closely, then we can see it once it begins to expand. So we want to look at 2 of the 4 types. The number one question that I'm asked more than any other question, and I've been doing this for 20 years, the number one question that I'm asked is, how did you get started in this? How did you get interested in this? How did this all begin for you? It was 1985. We were living in Dallas, Texas, and I was going to graduate school. Our oldest daughter, Rachel, she was 12 years old at the time. I love her. I have 4 precious daughters, but Rachel was my hardest or toughest daughter. And I couldn't quite exactly understand why. The other 3 weren't like her. She wasn't bad. She wasn't mean. She's just difficult. And it bothered me. Well, one night a friend of mine was passing through town. We were sitting on the back porch of my home in Dallas, Texas, and he looked at me and he said, what's the matter with you? And I said, what do you mean? He said, you're just not yourself. It's like something's bothering you. And I dropped my head and I said, it's Rachel. And he said, what has she done? Now, have you ever tried to explain something to someone and you didn't know what was wrong yourself? That can be, it's like when I take my car to the mechanic and he asks me what's wrong with it. I don't know. I don't know if it needs oil or a cheeseburger. I'm not sure. I'm not a mechanic. That's why I brought it to you. So he said, what's wrong? And I couldn't put it into words. And I didn't want to say she was mean. I didn't want to say she was rebellious. I was looking for words. And I finally said, she's just hard. She's just hard. And he said to me, that quickly, he looked at me and he said, have you ever given her a personality profile assessment? He said that so quickly, I looked at him and said, what? He said, have you ever given her a personality profile assessment? I said, I don't know what that is. There's an old Chinese proverb that says, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. I don't know if you've ever heard that or not, but it's so true. And I was so ready. Rachel was playing basketball in the backyard, and he called her over. He gave her this assessment. He scored it in a few minutes, told her she could go play basketball some more. He began to work with it, and he looked at it, and he said, wow, she is a real high D. I had never seen one of these before, so I didn't know how to look at it or interpret it. He said, look at how strong she is. Her 2 strongest traits are both task. She's a D-C personality type. I had never heard that, so I didn't know what he meant. He looked at me, he said, the reason you're having a hard time raising her is because she doesn't like you very much. To which I said, really? Then he said, she doesn't like anybody very much. Now, he wasn't trying to put her down, but what he was trying to do was help me to explain her frame of reference. See, a task-oriented person is all about the task, and that's okay. But if you try to help somebody or connect with somebody in a way that feels good to you, but it doesn't feel good to them, it just won't happen. It's almost like you're speaking 2 different languages. So he looked at me and he said, do you have any trouble with Rachel at bedtime? It was like he pinpointed the situation. And I said, yeah, every night's a war. He said, well, what do you say to her at bedtime? I said, well, I usually say to her, Rachel, you need to be in bed by 10 o'clock. When I said that, he went, ah. He said, that's what you say to her? I said, yeah, what's wrong with that? He said, when you say to a D type, you need to be in bed by 10 o'clock, that may be what you say, but that's not what she hears. What she hears is, you want to fight? And I said, how do you want to fight out of you need to be in bed? He just dropped his head. He said, you don't understand D types. And I said, help me. Please help me. And he began to coach me. You know what got my attention, ladies and gentlemen? He worked with my daughter for 12 minutes. I had worked with her for 12 years, and he knew more about her than I did. That bothered me. How is this possible that you can know so much so quickly about a person? As I talked to him, he said, once you understand personalities, it changes everything. And it did. I am so proud of her today. She owns her own business. She's a powerful, strong, 38-year-old businesswoman who's doing great in life. But I'm just so glad that I began to understand her style. I began to talk to her differently. The next night at dinner, I said to her, "Hey, Tiger," and that's her nickname, by the way. I said, "Tiger, you can go to bed." Remember now, he taught me you're going to have to say things to her differently. I said, "You can go to bed tonight anytime you want to. You can be in control and you're in charge, but 10's the limit." And she said, "Okay." And that night at 10 o'clock, she went in her room, shut the door, and went to bed. I went and stood by the door and listened. Then I picked all my teeth up off the floor. I could hardly believe it. Things changed in our relationship when I started working with her in accordance with her personality instead of according to my personality. That's why it's powerful. You see, you're dealing with the one aspect that you have some control over, the way you act, the way you behave, the way you connect with people.